Do we have a, is there a way we can get the mic turned on? Is it round button? Check, check, check. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. How are you guys doing today? Good. So, my main profession is being an audio engineer, and that's kind of what I'm going to try to teach you guys today. This is kind of an interesting class because of the fact that, interesting lecture, I should say, because of the fact that you guys are not audio engineers, nor do you hope to become audio engineers, I don't think. What I'd like to do today is show you just kind of a general way to get into doing some basic audio editing. But if I would like to warn you up front that if I start going over people's heads, you can just stop me at any time and just be like, wait, what are you talking about? Feel free. I do that with even my students that I teach actual audio engineering to, so please just stop me if you need that. Today what we're going to do is we're going to start out by downloading an application, okay? For those of you who have computers in front of you, I would like you to actually go through with this as well. We're going to start out by downloading this wonderful program called Audacity. So if you just do a Google search for Audacity, now, there are tons of different audio and editing programs out there. This one is fantastic because of the fact that it's free, it's fairly simple to use, it can convert to a lot of different formats, and it's great to have around. As an audio engineer myself, I actually love having this program available to me, even if I'm using really high-end programs in addition to this. You'll have to excuse me, I've got a little bit of a hoarse voice today, so bear with me. So as soon as you get here, download the version that's going to work for your computer. If you're on a Windows computer, download the Windows version, Audacity for Mac, if you're on Mac. And if anyone in here is running Linux, download it for that. Is anyone here running Linux? What's that? If you're on an iPad, unfortunately, you'll probably just have to oversee this on someone else's computer. So if you can kind of get friendly with someone else who has a computer close to you. Yes?
Okay. Is it installer or zip file?
Well, as you can see here, and I'd like to kind of see how this is going to work. I'm sure it'll be fine. If you go to just the regular installer, that's going to be the best one to actually download. The zip file, you can see that this is actually something that'll kind of help you get around any kind of limitations in terms of permissions for your specific companies. So if your internet, if you've got a firewall that's preventing you from downloading anything, this may be a little bit easier of a way to go, a zipped file. I would probably suggest going the direction of getting the full 2.0.3, either DMG, or the PC formatted version of it, the EXL, whichever version is going to be, or excuse me, EXE, whichever version is going to be best for your computer. It should only take a few minutes for you guys to download. In the meantime, I'll show you just essentially what to do once you get to that point. If you're using a Mac, which I see a lot of people in here are using Macs, the idea is once you've got this on your desktop, you're going to take this folder right here and simply drag it into your applications. Okay? Now, as I am not using a PC in front of me right now, there will be an install document of some kind explaining on a PC how to actually go about installing it. My guess is that you'll probably have to do something very similar, in which case you'll probably just have to either drag, or the EXE should launch the entire application and make it so that you can actually function with it that way. You didn't think you'd be working so much right at the beginning of this class, did you? Everybody getting pretty close to that? Getting that all set up? Once you get there, launching Audacity is just as simple as going into the folder where you've essentially copied and pasted it. from your applications folder if you're on a Mac, from whichever folder it's launching from. You should be able to run the actual application from wherever you've downloaded it if you're on a PC. Anyone get to this point yet? Getting there? Okay. Got a couple people? I want to see a razor. Yeah, we're great in terms of like downloading as many things, as many packages as possible through one Wi-Fi. This is great. Say that again. Yeah, at this point in time, you can even click OK on this. You don't need help right now, but this is where we're going to start for just a second. So what we're going to do is a couple of different demonstrations using Audacity today. Then about halfway through this, we're going to start using I'm going to show you guys a little bit of how to use Pro Tools, which is an industry standard audio editing program that is much more intuitive, much more functional than something like Audacity. I want to show it to you primarily because of essentially the fact that it does so much, but also because it is kind of an industry standard. Now, I want to spend a little bit more time on Audacity because this is what you'll be using today to do any kind of audio editing for the projects that you will be working on. But Pro Tools in and of itself is a really great thing to have because of the fact that it does everything that Audacity could never even hope to do. Okay, so I'm going to start out real quickly by importing a file. If you've got an audio file right now, you're welcome to import just whatever you'd like to. If you are already to the point where in your project you've got an audio file, you're welcome to just go import and then audio. You'll also notice there is a key command which is Shift Command and I. This will show in either PC or in Mac as well. So it'll give you the key command for both of those, or it should. I'm going to use this specific piece right here. This is someone else's piece. I have no rights to it, but for the purposes of teaching, I would like to use this one because it is a great piece, and in addition to that, you can do a lot with it. So here's the piece. Okay, so we're going to have to deal with that fairly quietly. See if I can actually boost that here. That'll probably help a little. Okay, so starting out with this one, we're going to notice a couple of things specifically about this specific project that we've got in front of us right now. The first thing that we're going to notice is how much room there is between the tops right here and the actual tops of the waveforms. Can you guys see how there's a distance between the waveform and kind of this open area that's not being utilized at all? Well, here's something that I want you guys to be aware of. This is okay to have in any kind of music that you're working on, any kind of piece that you're working on, because we're always, in terms of anything audio, trying to avoid what's called clipping. Does anybody in here know what clipping is? Anybody ever experienced clipping before? Yeah? Can you? What's that? No, not quite. Anytime you're talking about clipping, what that actually is after a certain threshold, after a certain point, you go above that, and it'll start essentially distorting. If anybody in here is a guitar player, you've used this 1,000 times with any kind of guitar amplifier that you've used when you use distortion on it. It's the same concept. Unfortunately, with the majority of things that you're doing in audio, you want the least amount of clipping as possible so you can get a clean signal. Now, the important thing to understand about this is if you're utilizing any kind of audio, the clipping can happen anytime you're pushing the limits of what these are, and these are waveforms. These waveforms can be as loud or as quiet as you've actually recorded from the source itself. And each of these actual pieces, you can actually tell the volume just by the height of each of these waveforms. Essentially, if we were to zoom in on this, they would just be waves, like you would gather sound waves. Okay? This is just a representation of this over a little bit of a longer period of time. So here's what we're looking at. At this point in time, we've got a good amount of space here. That's fine, okay? However, if we're putting this to some kind of online medium, it may not compete in terms of volume with the majority of things that we're going to be dealing with online, okay? Has anyone ever had a problem with that before, where you put something online and it's much, much quieter than you anticipated it being? I think I've got a couple of heads shaking yes in here. That's good. Here's what you need to do to be able to take care of that. This is the first step that you do. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to do what's called normalizing this entire waveform. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the actual track itself. I'm going to press Command and A, which is selecting all. You could do that in Edit as well. And I'm going to run a normalizing function on this entire piece. Okay? All I have to do is click normalize. It'll come up with a threshold. I'm actually going to set this not to -1. I'm going to set it to -0.3. That's really typical in terms of audio, to set it to about -0.2, -0.3 dB, so that it's not hitting the very top, but it is actually pushing it to a limit where it's audible to whatever you're putting it against online. You can do the normalized stereo channels independently. This right here is a stereo track that we're utilizing. And basically, the functions that you've got at this point in time with removing any DC offset, normalizing maximum amplitude, this is basically the way that you want to have it set up. Okay? Click OK on that.
Can we stop for a second?
Yeah.
I'm a little backed up here. So I selected all, and it shows that it was selected, but then when I go under Effect tab, nothing lights up for me to click that specific.
Is something playing right now? Or do you have, maybe you don't have anything selected. That could, either of those could make it.
It went from white to gray. I did Open Apple A, it goes gray.
Yeah, it should be able to get it. Command A should all be gray.
Yeah.
Right there. And then at this point in time, you should have access to at least the majority of these. You won't have access to some of these, but you'll have access to the majority of these up here. Is that working for everyone? Any other questions as we've gotten to this point so far? I don't want to go too fast for you guys, because it's going to be a lot to take in. So as you can see, once I've normalized this, it's brought these levels up considerably. So if I actually sit and play this now, it's quite a bit louder. So one of the things I want you guys to be aware of too is that normalizing isn't always the thing that you should do. Okay? Sometimes that can push things to a limit that you don't want them to go to. Also, sometimes if you've recorded something too loud in the first place, normalizing can just make it worse. Okay? But keep in mind also that normalizing is not pushing the limits of this waveform past where it's supposed to go. It's only turning everything up to essentially the loudest point that you've got within this entire waveform. That make sense? Awesome. So, couple functions I want you guys to be aware of. This is essentially a multi-track style recording DAW. Okay, and a DAW is what's called a digital audio workstation. This is essentially a multi-track recorder. This is kind of what it's designed for. So if you'd like, you can actually generate more different tracks to be able to import, additional information, anything like that. Okay, so you can have as many playing as you want to at any given time. Okay. Audacity is a little bit limited in terms of the way that you actually can record into the system. It's not going to give you, if you've got a 8-channel interface, it's not going to give you necessarily all those inputs into the Audacity programming. But with you guys in here, you're not going to necessarily even be worried about that because of the way that you're actually just basically taking audio files, sticking them in, or recording directly from your computer yourself. Okay. So a couple things that I want you guys to be aware of. If you've got multiple tracks and you don't want something playing or do want something playing, the mute features will mute anything within this track, okay, and it'll only deal with this specific track itself. The solo feature will make it so that that and only that is playing. Okay, so instead of going through and muting every single track that you're utilizing at any given time, it gives you the availability to just listen to that one by just a click of a button. All right. Other things that you want to be aware of, panning. So if you've got a mono track, this is going to be a little bit more prevalent. You'll notice that if I start playing this piece here, and I pan it to one side, it's only going to be playing through one speaker. If I pan it to the other side, it's only going to be playing through the other speaker. Now from what it sounds like, we've got pretty much a mono connection going in here. So for the most part, those are some simple concepts that you want to be aware of when you're actually putting audio into this system. Okay. You can also record directly into the system itself. Up here, you'll notice some very simple features. This section is called a transport. You don't need to write that down or anything like that, and no need to understand the technical concepts of what things are called, but just to be aware, this is called a transport. Anytime you've used any kind of DVD player, car stereo system in your house, any of those kinds of things, anytime you're dealing with things like pause, play, stop, rewind, fast forward, record, those kinds of things are always called a transport. So that's something, if you can take that home, it's kind of a fun little detail that you can tell your friends, right? Basically, these are just designed to transport yourself within the actual audio medium, okay? So the idea is you've got the play feature, which is exactly that, gives you the ability to play. The fast forward feature, which is going to let you fast forward to a specific place. Actually, these are designed to specifically skip to the start or skip to the end of the piece. Okay? You don't really have a fast forward as much as you would in some other pieces here. Pause, obviously, exactly what it sounds like. And finally, record. Now, you'll notice if you start recording, what I'm going to be getting here is the actual recording of what's happening via my computer. Okay? Because of how I've got the input set up, it's just picking up from the microphone of my computer. Now what's great about this is I can go ahead and mute that, and I'm still going to be recording this. Okay, so if we go back now. Notice if you start recording, what I'm going to be getting here is the actual recording of what's happening via. Okay, so already you've got the ability to just quickly be able to record straight into your system. Okay, which I'm hoping is going to benefit you with the projects that you guys are working on, right? If not, then it's also giving you the ability to be able to pull any kind of external audio in just by importing it like we saw before. Any questions thus far? So at this point in time, I've got this normalized. I'm actually going to go back a little bit. And I think for the most part, Audacity has an unlimited amount of undos. So anytime you hit that Command Z, it'll take you back, I think, as far as you possibly can go. Some DAWs, like Pro Tools, for example, only has a limited amount of undos. So if you get to a point where you've screwed up your entire piece enough, you'll probably have to go back considerably and start over, okay? Because there's only 32 undos, which, believe it or not, is not that many. Sounds like a lot, but once you start undoing 32 times, it's not that many. So a couple things before we go on too much further. First of all, you're going to see a couple of selections here to be able to set up your specific system. Now, this is a nice, easy, efficient way to set up this system because of the fact that you've got everything right where you need it, right in front of you in terms of how you're actually interfacing with real audio to put it into your computer. So the core audio is probably what you're going to be utilizing if you're on a Mac. It might be something similar to like an ASIO if you're using a PC. I'm not exactly sure. If you've got a PC, what does it say in that box? What is it? MME? Okay, that would make sense as well. It's just utilizing your built-in audio card within your computer to be able to run that. Okay, that's all that is. You don't need to worry about it. If you've got another interface, though, an external plugged-in one, which none of you in here I'm sure have, but if you did, that's where you'd actually go in and select that. Okay. The next thing you want to be aware of is the output that you're actually utilizing. You'll notice that only one is selected here. It's just the built-in output. That's exactly perfectly fine because that's the built-in output of your computer itself. That means that if you've got your speakers set up, then it's going to come out of your speakers. You'll notice if I play here without this plugged in, it's just going to come out of my speakers. Okay. Now, if you plug in a headphone jack like I've got into my computer right now, it will basically just bypass that. You won't have to change anything here, so no worries about plugging in headphones or not having headphones plugged in. It's still going to output the same way via this specific system, and it's going to take care of that with your computer itself. Okay? The built-in microphone, it's going to give you probably two different options, built-in input and built-in microphone. Within your computer, within most computers these days, PC, Mac, doesn't matter, you're probably going to have one microphone built into the computer itself. I don't know any computers pretty much these days that don't. Even iPads have those kinds of things plugged into them. And then you're probably going to have what's called a built-in input. If you were to look on the side of your computer next to where your headphone jack actually is, you'll probably notice another one that has this other kind of image there that doesn't look like headphones. That's actually an input. Anytime you wanted to actually plug in any kind of microphone, external microphone that has this kind of a connection, you could easily do that. Okay. Questions about that? Fantastic. Okay, so at this point in time, let's talk a little bit about where to go from here. Okay, so you'll notice that I play this, and it takes a minute before it starts playing. Okay, which is in some capacities fine, but maybe you don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just select that portion where nothing is playing. Okay, and I'm simply going to hit one button, and that is the delete button. And you'll notice the entire waveform is now moved more towards the beginning of the actual track itself. You guys see that? One more time. Okay. So all I've done here is essentially take out that specific piece. Now, one thing that you want to be aware of with Audacity and the way it works is that if I select anything, let's say in the center, here's what's going to happen. If I delete it, it's going to take the last end of the waveform and stick it up with the other part of the waveform. This is not something that's necessarily desirable. In fact, most people who would be using something like Pro Tools would not want this to happen. I'm sure that there is a way within Audacity to actually change this to make it so that it's not on what we would call in Pro Tools shuffle mode, but off the top of my head, I don't know how to do that. I could probably find it real quick if you guys had any questions about how to do that. But here's kind of what I want you to get out of this at this point. This is going to be the way that it's going to be edited if you're deleting pieces out. Okay, and that's something to kind of be aware of. Yeah.
Which is desirable if you're editing an audio.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you're dealing with voice, this is something that makes it so much faster to deal with. If I were to be doing a voiceover, for example, and I may pull up an example of that in just a second here, so you guys can kind of play, so you guys can kind of see what would happen if I were to do that. It would make it so much easier for me to deal with, so that it just puts it all together and I don't have to keep moving stuff over. Okay, so it's desirable in some ways. It's less desirable if you're dealing with music because you want things, you know, on specific beats and times. It's just depending on what you're working on. But you'll notice now, if I go to the very beginning of this, I'm going to use my button up here on my transport to skip to the start, and I'm going to go ahead and play. You'll notice there was no pause between when it started versus when it was initially set. Yeah?
Can you not edit MP3s before this? Does it have to be a wave?
It does not have to be a wave.
I just was doing that
So the great thing about Audacity is you can really edit whatever kind of format you want in here. Yeah, there are some formats that are going to be a little bit less friendly. I'll tell you guys right now that the ones that you are going to probably primarily want to use in terms of audio for anything that you're working on are probably about two, WAV and MP3. Okay. Now the difference between WAV and MP3, a WAV is a full resolution file. Okay. It's going to include all the information that was originally recorded with it, especially if it's 24-bit 44.1 kilohertz. Which is the sample rate and the bit depth of that. Don't worry if you don't get any of that kind of stuff. But that's above CD resolution. Okay, so anytime you've listened to a CD, it's actually below that resolution that I just explained. So waves are actually very high resolution. So if you want something to sound very good, you use a wave. The other one that you can use that's along the same lines is an AIFF. Really the only difference between those two is that AIFFs are designed by Mac initially, and waves are designed by PC initially, okay, or Microsoft. The thing that you want to be aware of that as well is that it doesn't really matter which one you're using. However, for the most part, most people, if you're dealing with anything in audio, are going to probably prefer waves as opposed to AIFFs. Okay? That's just kind of how the system works. That's how most people prefer it. Because if you see an AIFF come into your studio, it seems a little bit strange to suddenly see that, even though it is full resolution. But AIFF, wave, full resolution, something very important to remember. Things like MP3s, if you've downloaded anything ever from iTunes, those are AAC files, which are supposedly lossless, but they are lossy formats because you're basically stripping out information that's going to make the resolution considerably less, okay, despite what Apple wants to say. So remember, MP3, compressed, and it's going to sound considerably less good than a wave or an AIFF. Now, the difference there is, if you're uploading something online, an MP3 is going to be actually preferred. Well, okay, so you're asking me at this point probably, why would an MP3 be preferred if I'm putting it online and you're just telling me use WAV or AIFF because it's full resolution, it's going to sound better? Well, here's the reason. AIFFs and WAVs are considerably larger in size. That means that if you're uploading something to the internet in an AIFF or a WAV form, A, it's going to take longer to upload. B, it's going to take a client longer to download if you've got someone visiting your specific website and downloading stuff. And it's also, 3, going to take longer for the actual page to load based on the fact that that is a larger format piece. Okay? MP3s are actually better because of the fact that it takes a lot of information out so that it's easy to actually upload, download quicker because of the fact that it's actually a considerably smaller file. Okay? So that's something to keep in mind anytime you're working with waves, anytime you're working with MP3s. Waves have their benefit, MP3s are going to have their benefit. And anytime you're using either one, it's just up to you on how and which you're going to use. Does that all make sense? I'm sure some people in here are probably aware of that already, but it's always good to have kind of a reminder of which to kind of utilize. So right now I'm actually using an MP3 because it's taking less time for me to actually upload it, import it, all those kinds of things into this specific program. It's easy with Audacity to just import whichever kind of audio you'd like. You'll notice that I've got, this is an MP3 that's actually dealing right now. I've got a WAV file here. They're not going to sound too much different, and I'll kind of give you a, I'll just double check which one this is. Okay, so we're going to listen to just real quickly the difference from an MP3 and a WAV. I'm going to get rid of this first one and just import the second one as a WAV because this is an MP3. So you'll notice that it's going to probably come up with this error if you're, or not error, but this warning if you're importing uncompressed files. Copy them into the project or read them directly from the current location without copying. Your current preference is set to copy in. Reading files directly allows you to play, edit them almost immediately. This is less safe than copying in because you must retain the files within their original names, blah, blah, blah. It's fine. It's basically, you can either make the choice to copy and utilize the files wherever you're utilizing them, or you can basically read the files directly from the original. In this case, I'm going to use the read the files directly from the original because of the fact that it's going to be faster in terms of the points of demonstration. But it's always nice to be able to make sure that you're making copies of files so that if you damage something or something's, ends up being destroyed in some way, you can go back and access the original. It's always good to back up. So here we go. This is a wave. Now in these speakers, you're probably not going to hear a huge difference in terms of the actual fidelity. And here is the MP3. Once again. So you're really not hearing probably a huge difference, right? Is anyone hearing a considerable difference? They're like, wow, this is like one is awful, one is great. Probably not, right? So that's to say that for the most part, if you're using MP3s, it's not gonna completely, piss everyone off and go, this is terrible audio quality. Okay, that's not gonna be the case. Okay. And I do want to point that out because of the fact that most people consider MP3s kind of they're compressed, they sound like crap. Okay, they don't. In comparison to waves, they sound, the fidelity is less. But for the most part, general listening ears are not going to notice much of a difference. This is why iTunes has been able to go off of their AAC format since they basically started. Okay, it's a lossy file, but most people don't seem to mind. I don't know why. It's mostly, like I said, there's really just not a huge difference. Okay, so in going back to this, let's say I want to get rid of that piece one more time so that on both of these files, each of those now is not going to include a little bit of a break at the end there, or at the beginning there. Fairly easy to go in and edit those kinds of pieces. Use it at your discretion the best that you can. You'll notice up here that we've got a couple different magnifying glasses, and I do recommend utilizing these as well because you will need to go in, zoom in so that you can actually see the project that you're working on. You'll also notice here, if you go to a specific point, you can actually zoom in, zoom out based on where you're actually sitting with your magnifying glass on these specific pieces. Okay, any questions up to this point? So far, fairly simple, right, guys? I mean, it's not something that is going to completely overwhelm you as you guys are working in audio. I'm going to minimize this a little bit so we can see the entire piece. The fit to screen does come in handy. Okay, so one thing that we're doing right now is we're dealing with stereo tracks. If you are recording with a microphone of any kind, keep in mind that a microphone is not in stereo. A microphone is only in mono. Okay? So if you create stereo tracks, if you actually have a stereo track and you start recording to it, it's still going to be in mono. There's no panning issues that you can take care of that way. It's all just going to be in mono. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, we've got this project that we're putting up on the website, it's just a voice project, okay? Keep in mind that everything like that is going to be in stereo, or excuse me, mono. But if you're actually dealing with anything that's typically music, will pretty extensively be designed to be in stereo, okay? This is kind of based on the onset of the Beatles and how they kind of revolutionized the whole idea of two separate signals being taken to two different stereo systems, being taken to essentially two different ears. So, yeah. Here's a couple of things that I want you to be aware of. So the normalizing, we've already taken care of looking at normalizing for each of these individual tracks. That's a huge thing that's going to make it so that if you're putting something online, if you're putting something, an audio piece up on the internet, that's going to make it so that people can hear it a little bit better. This is also something that you might want to consider anytime you're dealing with YouTube videos, is to normalize the audio within that video as well. Okay? Most video programs will have some kind of functionality to be able to normalize the audio. So whatever you're utilizing, if it's iMovie or Final Cut or Avid or whatever you're using, you should be able to add that kind of a functionality to it so that you're seeing the point of normalizing the audio that you're working with. So we're going to do this real quickly one more time just so you can see how I've gone about doing it, and that is to normalize at negative 0.3. We're seeing that there. The other thing to keep in mind is we've got all these different kinds of, these are what are called plugins. Essentially, they're just effects. Okay? They're just a way to affect the audio that you're dealing with. Now, in terms of editing, yeah, we can cut and get rid of stuff all day. We can put stuff in. If you decide you wanted to, you can easily just highlight a specific portion and go up to Edit, Copy, or Cut, or any of those kinds of things. Let's say we want to copy this, and I'm going to put the cursor right here. Just pasting it, we can copy and paste anything. It's just similar to like a Word document, okay? And that's one thing that I do want you to be aware of. If you've worked in something like a Word document before, the idea of copying and pasting is fairly intuitive to you guys. So right here we can see that we've got that piece that's now pasted at the very end. So and you'll notice it'll pop back in here. So you can take stuff, move it all around if you need to. This is especially helpful when you're dealing with voice. So if it's just voice, you can actually essentially manipulate anything that a person says word by word, phrase by phrase, which I'm sure a lot of you are going, oh, that's cool. I can actually use that, right? This is why any kind of DAW, any kind of program that deals directly with some kind of audio editing is actually really helpful for the most part, because of the fact that it gives you the opportunity to be able to actually go in and do that kind of stuff. A couple of other functions I want you guys to be aware of before we get too extensively into talking about plugins is, I just want to jump into plugins. So there's a few things I want you guys to be aware of here. First of all, you're going to notice one for equalization, which is basically boosting, cutting, turning up, turning down different frequencies within the hearing spectrum. Okay? So if I run an equalizer on this, for the most part, with the actual Audacity, GUI, the way that it works is once you get to a point where you've got something processed, it's kind of processed that way, and you'd have to go back and undo it. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to just draw a curve in here. Let's see. So there's an EQ curve. That's a pretty... Let's actually do this. So here's a graphic EQ, and this is maybe the direction to go. We can do a drawing EQs in type thing as well. The idea is at this point in time, we've got a boost of 6 dB all the way up to about 300 hertz. What does that mean for you? That means that you've got a really, really loud low end. Okay? You've got this cut mid-frequency, which in terms of EQ, mids, somewhere around 200 to about I don't know, 12,000 hertz-ish, that's really being generous there, is, I'm even going to be less generous than that. I'm going to say about 6,000 hertz is typically where your voice, the frequency of a human voice is going to come into play. Well, why is that important? That means that if I boost anything in this center here, it's going to be really easy to hear in terms of human voice. So if you're working on something that you can't hear a voice well enough, EQing just that center portion will actually make it considerably easier to hear. Okay? That can also, if you boost something too much, it's going to make it so it's really abrasive to the ears too. Because you guys, as humans, you guys are kind of actually tuned to be able to hear in this area a little bit better than higher or lower pitches. Okay? That's why in terms of having conversations with people, you actually hear conversation better than you would if you were hearing really low frequencies, really high frequencies. Okay? And at this point in time, I've got a boost starting at 4,000 hertz and up. So this is kind of a weird inverse of probably what I'd do if I wanted to boost some kind of voice. You'll notice that I'm able to actually kind of take these different curves all over the place, manipulate them just by grabbing one of the dots that we're dealing with here. And you'll notice, if I preview this, so that's what that preview is going to sound like of this heavy EQ curve. Maybe we want that, maybe we don't. This is going to be kind of a weird EQ curve for that specific track. For the most part, you're probably going to see what are well, in equalization, you're probably going to want to utilize that kind of mid-range territory. And you can kind of see we've got low, mid, and high, and you can kind of see how they're grouped together in terms of the graphical representation. You can kind of see how they become shorter, essentially frequency curves. Okay. So you can see how they're sort of grouped there. Let's say we want to process that. So that's going to process this entire piece. Okay. And I do want you to be aware of that because this, in some capacities as an audio person, I probably wouldn't want to have that happen. Because of the fact that I prefer things like this to run in real time, because of the fact that I can actually make snap determinations once I grab a specific point on an EQ curve and change it. Okay? Any questions about EQ? At all? Any questions up to now? Is this going over people's heads at all? Yes. Okay. Okay. Let me back up then. Where can I kind of steer you in a direction of understanding for some of this stuff? Is it just way too much information? Way too much. Lost you a long time ago. Okay. Okay, so really all EQ is doing, and I want to be pretty as clear as I possibly can on this. All EQ is doing is just boosting or turning down pitches. Okay, so if you hear something that's high pitch, you can turn that down with an EQ. If you hear something that's low pitch, you can turn that down or turn it up with an EQ. Okay? It's just volume control for high and low and everything in between. Does that make a little bit more sense?
That's the kind of dumbing down I need.
Okay. Yeah, essentially, okay, so if we're dealing with an axis of an equalization, the sidebar here is all the decibel volume. Okay, so that's how loud or how quiet you're taking it. So at 0 dB, that's essentially the main zeroed out point. Okay, you're not doing anything to it if it's at 0 dB. Okay, if you're boosting it, it's going to be into the plus or the just essentially the numeric value. If you're taking it down below that line, like this point right there, you're basically turning down that specific frequency for that specific point. Okay, make sense? Yeah. Somewhere between about 300 to 5,000 or 6,000 hertz. And you'll find it. I mean, if you play around with an EQ enough, you'll hear the difference. You really will. And the other side, by the way, if you were to look at this, and I forgot to mention this, if you're looking at the other axis, the bottom side, the horizontal axis, that's going to be essentially the hertz range, the frequency range, from the very lowest low that humans can hear to the very highest high that humans can hear. That range is 20 to 20,000 hertz. Okay? So really, you're just boosting or cutting, and that anytime I say boosting or cutting, that is really just volume. You're just turning up or turning down specific frequencies to make it so that specific frequencies are easier to hear. Okay? So the reason you'd want to use something like this is to make something like a voice more prevalent. You can use EQs to get rid of like hums really easily. Especially if you know the concept of every single circuit in the United States is based off of a 50-cycle frequency. That means that if you've got this awesome power buzz within your specific recording that you've made, this kind of like low-pitched hum, it's probably a 50-cycle hum, which if you're utilizing it, you can just take that frequency out altogether. Okay? Yeah?
Would it be possible for you to record yourself saying a sentence and then show
Easily.
how to do what you're supposed to do?
Easily. Okay. Give me a good sentence to say. Somebody. I'll just do one. Here we go. Let me start from the top. This is me recording a sentence. I know, right? I have no idea. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up to Effect. I'm going to run an EQ on it. I'm going to get rid of this EQ. And I'm going to play this back real quick before we do anything to it. This is me recording a sentence. Okay, so already I'm hearing some undesirable things. I'm hearing a pretty low end, ugh. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take out all the low from my voice using an equalizer. And I'm going to take it considerably down like this. This is, in most music, in most audio fields, this is what's called a high-pass filter. You don't need to know what that means or anything, but what you're going to notice, it's going to take everything below a certain frequency range pretty much out altogether. So here's the preview of that. This is me recording a sentence. See how I took a lot of that out? That's what I'm looking for. Okay? So it cleared things up a little bit. It took a little of the low end out of my voice, but this is a pretty harsh curve here. In which case I could make it more, I could have a little bit more of the frequencies in there. This is me recording a sentence. Okay, so that sounds now a little bit more natural. Now, if I were to actually do the opposite thing here and boost the high end, for example, you'll notice something completely different happen. This is me recording a sentence. Hear how that high end is now really prevalent? Let me turn this back down. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually put an EQ curve right in the center so that you can hear kind of the mid-frequency boost that I was talking about before. This is me recording a sentence. You can hear how that kind of boosts that frequency specifically. The idea with all this is that you're just trying to cut specific frequencies to make it more audible, to make it sound better for whoever you're presenting the audio to. Yeah.
So, like the 20, is that hertz at the bottom line?
Yeah, the bottom line is hertz.
Okay, so I had originally been thinking of it like the green line is at the beginning of the recording, and then
Yeah, it's not quite like that. And I can see how easily you could mistake that, but it's not quite like that. More or less, it's talking about the low pitches versus the high pitches.
So your 20 is the low pitches, and 1,000 or 10,000 is the high.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, low is on the left, high is on the right. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I completely understand. So you're not talking about your voice at all in doing this. You're talking about the background noise.
You're talking about everything. The voice and the background noise, everything. So the idea is you're taking specific frequencies and boosting them for the entire audio piece that you've got recorded. Okay. The idea is that you're taking the pitch from one specific audio recording. Now you could do this if you had just a single recording, a single mono recording. You could do this with just one track, for example. Okay, so you could basically boost just the voice, or cut just the voice in specific frequencies. Or you could do that to the entire piece altogether. In the case that we were looking at before with this, with the music, we were doing it with the entire piece. Make sense? Colleen, I don't.
I couldn't actually tell any difference when you took stuff out. I was listening, but I think I was only listening to your voice or something, and I with my untrained ear, couldn't really tell the difference between when you didn't have something out and when you did have something out.
Okay. Then I will do a much more prevalent curve. So what I'm going to do is what's called a telephone effect. The idea is that if you take everything out in the low end and everything out in the high end, you'll get what sounds like an old-timey telephone. This is me recording a sentence. Hear how it sounds like it's really low fidelity, how it's like it doesn't sound nearly as good as if we were to just flatten this curve out and play it again. This is me recording a sentence. Everybody hear that? That's pretty drastic. Yeah? So, I mean, the idea is that I took all the high ends out, all the low ends out, and just left the mids there. So anytime you hear that kind of a telephone sound within any kind of like song, where it sounds like they're talking through like a tiny little microphone or tiny little speaker, that's typically what they do. They'll just make that and actually record it through a fairly good microphone and stuff like that. So you guys who were saying that you didn't quite hear the difference, you could hear that. I just want to make sure, right? Okay. Cool. Questions about that at all? Fantastic. So this is going to be a slightly harder one to hear, and I apologize in advance that it is hard to hear, okay? But what we're going to look at now is something that's called compression. Compression is a strange topic to talk about because it's talking about nothing but volume. Okay? Now, if you're talking about volume, for the most part, stuff that you want to deal with within pretty much anything that you're doing, spoken word, music, within any kind of medium of recorded audio, you probably want to have some kind of compression. Now, remember that I talked before about compression via audio files? In terms of MP3s, waves, those kinds of things, that MP3s are compressed. This is not the same thing, okay? That's talking about taking away information so that the size of the file itself is going to be smaller or larger depending on how much compression you're actually adding to it. This is talking about nothing but dynamic range, nothing but volume. The idea of compression is going to be that you're going to take an actual audio file and you're going to make the quietest quiet balancing out with the loudest loud. Okay? So what a compressor does is this. It takes all of the really quiet stuff and turns it up to compensate with the rest of the louder material, okay, after a certain point. The second thing that it does is it turns down the loudest parts to compensate for the quieter parts. So it's balancing everything out. It's turning louds down, turning quiets up. Okay? Now this is all happening automatically. Like I said, this is a little bit of a harder thing to hear. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to try to push it to the absolute limit where we're basically doing what's called limiting, and in which case it's going to essentially make everything super, super consistently loud. So we're going to set this threshold. So I'm just setting some specifics here. For the most part, if you understand the general idea of compression, you can kind of see what it's doing.
This is me recording a sentence.
Let me see if I can push it even further than that.
This is me recording a sentence.
So you may not be hearing this quite yet. Let's see if we can.
This is me recording a sentence.
Let's do this. I'm going to import that other track one more time and try and utilize that. I've got a track here. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change it so that the loudest loud is getting turned down and the quietest quiet is getting turned up. That means that intro section is going to be slightly louder. And it also means that the section past that is not going to be excessively loud. Okay, so it's not going to be this huge change. Peaks. Okay. So this is going to process this piece. You guys remember what the waveform looked like for the entire piece before, that you had at the very beginning some quiet pieces, then some louder pieces, then some quiet pieces. With this, you're going to notice that it's going to make it so that it's all just one big block, okay, for the most part. Okay, so we're going to zoom this back out. See how it's changed that, and it's now completely, so undo that real quick. And this has actually been normalized and EQ'd, so I'm going to go back on that a little bit. Well, let's even just go forward with it. So you can see that that's turned down all the really loud parts and kind of turned up the quiet parts to compensate for it. So if I play that again, that compared to that is not too much different in volume. Okay? Now if I had it before that, there's my quiet part, and this is going to be a little loud. Sorry guys in advance. Hear that volume change there? That's before compression, after compression. Okay? That's a little bit better of an example. This is something that in broadcast, they've been utilizing compressors for voices, for broadcast, for years. Okay, this is why when you hear like a radio station and you hear people talking, you hear music playing, nothing is ever like super loud, then super quiet. Okay, this is why nothing ever takes you by surprise and go, whoa, this is really loud, or oh, this is really quiet, I can barely hear it, I'm going to turn it all the way up. So it's that kind of a concept that we're dealing with here. Okay, you guys have heard compressors all your lives, you just haven't known it. Same thing with equalizers. You guys have heard equalizers all your life and just probably haven't known it. Okay, so any questions up to this point? with all of these things that we've talked about so far, with the projects that you guys are working on right now, do you think that this is going to help you immensely? I would hope so. This program is designed to just deal with audio, though. Okay, so you wouldn't be able to necessarily put in audio from a video. You'd actually have to probably separate it out beforehand. Okay. So what I'd like you guys to do is, you guys all have projects that you're working on right now, right? Do they have audio to them so far? I'm going to raise a hand. Who has audio to theirs so far? Okay. So no one has actually added any audio. That's fine. Here's what I want you guys to try out. I want you guys to try adding some audio to it. Okay? It doesn't matter what, but here's what I want you guys to try out. I want you guys to try, in Audacity, to just record something simple. Okay? Then I'm going to have you guys essentially sit down and try to manipulate it like we did with some of these pieces here. Okay? We're going to spend probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes on that, so that you guys can kind of get a good idea. Then we'll kind of wrap it up and see if you guys kind of got helped out from it. Now this can be just simply you guys talking so that you guys can have just a general idea of how to go about doing this. Or it can be more in-depth than that. You can import the actual music that you're going to look at utilizing. For the most part, I want you guys to utilize this just like you would with really anything that you're dealing with. So for the most part, you guys are all going to be probably dealing with some kind of music on a website like this, right? So here's what I want you guys to kind of keep in mind. As you find the pieces of a piece of music that you like, go ahead and just crop it down so it's that specific portion of that song.
Maybe just disappear into the fall.
Okay? And with any of this stuff, you can essentially just crop it all down to how you want it to appear, or how you want it to essentially audibly appear. Okay? So take 15 minutes and just try some stuff out with this. Okay? That means recording your own voice. That means recording whatever. You can record whatever you'd like.
Where would you suggest people go to import music?
Oh, that's a good question. What kind of music are you guys looking to add to something like this? Anyone? Yeah, I think for the most part, you guys are all going to be dealing with more voices than anything, right? So I would start with that. Try recording some voices in and work from there, and try some stuff out. This, I will say, for the most part, you're not going to understand a program like this unless you just sit and play with it. Okay, that's my experience with it, and that's why I want you guys to have a little bit of hands-on time with it right now. If you don't have a computer with you, if you're just running off an iPad today, please just try this at home. Go home to your home computer. This is not a large download. It's not going to take up a lot of space on your computer. Try some stuff with it. See what you can do with it. In addition to that, I definitely recommend trying this out in your business kind of endeavors as well, because I promise you, audio is one of those kinds of things that the more audio that you can add to a piece, the more kind of robust and fully developed it kind of ends up being. So on that note, if you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, and we'll call it for the day. Yes, I can, absolutely. My email is ESO Audio Arts. You guys have a paper ready? So ESO Audio Arts at gmail.com. Yeah. On what.com? Okay. Fantastic. Cool. Awesome. So please, if you need to reach out to me about any questions about anything we covered today, please feel free to. I'm fairly available, so as you know, I can get back to you probably within the day easily. Okay? All right, guys, thank you so much.